Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the April 25th, 2024 briefing. And this is the second briefing for our meeting next Thursday on May 2nd. We actually have no discussion items for today, but I do have one sort of announcement. In fact, I guess we ended up with 8 of us participated in the Veterans Cup competition for a trivia quiz, which I think we named ourselves Trivia Troop or something from Forsyth County, but we had Chantel Robinson was a part of that, and she brought her husband George. I'm not sure he was. I don't think she had to bring him kicking and screaming, but he was. But I think he enjoyed himself, and he was as Chantel said, he watches a lot of. He's excellent on Wheel of Fortune and on Jeopardy, and those shows he's good.
And he is a veteran.
And he is a veteran. Yes, he is. That is good. And our county manager Dudley Watts was there, and our deputy county manager also Damon Sanders Pratt was there. So we had our leadership troop and that part of there, and it was great. And we also had Carter Limmerman was there, and it was great having him as a part of it.
Who is also a veteran.
He's also a veteran. We did talk about his service. Kyle Haney was there, and from the library we had Caden Snyder, and Caden is 19 years old, and at the library, and he used to participate in trivia contests before, and he knew a few things, and there were 50 questions. We got 25 right, and we were the best team, and the next one was 24. So we sneaked by and won another year. But I'd encourage everyone to appreciate those of you that helped sponsor the table as we put that together, and hope that maybe there were actually 2 within a 12-month period this year. It may go down to just 1. In fact, the date's already set for next April, as I recall, or March. It's in March.
March 1st.
March 1st. So maybe we can get our sights on that. All right, happy to turn the meeting over to our county manager, Dudley Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, board members and staff and guests. So, as the chairman said, we just really have the review and kind of finalizing this agenda for the May 2nd, 2024 meeting. And so I'll go ahead and dive into it. The first item is a public hearing, and it's a public hearing to consider the expenditure of county general funds for an economic development project and authorizing an agreement with a company that is yet named. Hassani Mitchell is here. He presented at last Thursday. Any questions for Hassani? I think it's pretty straightforward. The name of the company would be announced publicly next Thursday, Hassani. So, do y'all need an additional presentation on the details of the incentive package? Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you, Hassani. Item 2 is an ordinance amendment proposed by Planning and Development Services staff to amend chapters 4 and 5 of the Unified Development Ordinances, or the UDO. Chris Murphy's here. Chris, again, why don't you come up and give them just remind them of sort of the backstory on this one and make sure there's no questions.
Good afternoon. This is a request. It's UDO CC 25, and we have reviewed this a number of times, and we held a public hearing back on this towards the end of March. And this is related to some issues that we've discovered with residential building multifamily, specifically looking to increase the maximum number of attached units in the RM5 multifamily zoning district, looking to increase the maximum building heights allowed in the RM8, 12, and 18 multifamily districts with an offset. Going over that height, you have to have an enhanced setback. And then the provision that I believe was the issue that was raised following the public hearing is the third provision, which is revising the threshold for which a buffer yard standard is required. Currently, this basically here is dealing with some of the rationale behind why we're doing the change. That kind of spells out what the first 2 provisions we're dealing with, going from 4 to 6 units for RM5 and looking at the increase in height for those 3 different multifamily districts. The fourth provision or area dealt with, and I'm sorry, that's still dealing with the height. The final provision that was a point of discussion dealt with the threshold for which a buffer yard kicks in. And currently, the ordinance requires a buffer yard to kick in when you have 5 units or more. And the provision as drafted is to have that threshold kick in when you have a site of greater than 1 acre. This does have limited applicability within the Forsyth County zoning jurisdiction. I went over some of those numbers last week. If you look at the number of lots that currently exist that are less than 1 acre in size, I believe there were 30, 35 such lots, and several of those are remnant NCDOT lots that are probably not undevelopable as a result of acquisition of property for road projects. There was a subdivision for some reason, and I'm not sure why. There's a subdivision of single-family homes that's zoned RM12. I'm not sure how that exists, but I mean, single family is allowed in multifamily. It's just an odd district out there. And then there were, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head. There were, I believe, around 30 parcels that were between 1 and 5 acres that could potentially be subdivided into one. Parcels less than 1 acre in size, but generally speaking, if you've got a larger parcel such as that, you would more than likely have more return by utilizing a 4 or 5 acre parcel as opposed to subdividing it into less than 1 acre parcels. I say all that, it would be our preference to have the ordinance adopted as it's been recommended. We did look at having an alternative version that removes the change for the county. It keeps the height provisions as we've proposed. It keeps the attached number of attached units as proposed in RM5 going from 4 to 6. It would eliminate this change. Again, we feel like there's limited applicability, but if the county commissioners so chose, you could choose to adopt the alternative version that would just keep the threshold for which a buffer yard would kick in at the current standard of 5 units or more. And with that, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Any questions for Chris? All right, I think we're good.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. All right, we have 3 special resolutions, and they'll be presented in detail next Thursday. It's a resolution recognizing May as Mental Health Awareness Month, also May as Historic Preservation Month, and then also May 5th through the 11th is Professional Clerks Week, and we'll celebrate our awesome clerk staff. So we'll have a chance to celebrate that. And then approval of minutes, which they
were sent out yesterday.
Yesterday, very good. All right, so that's that kind of introductory part of the meeting. So I have several budget and finance items. At last week's meeting, Denise Price reviewed items 7 and 8. 7 is a resolution authorizing the appropriation of behavioral health funds and the associated improving the execution of the associated agreements for FY25, and then the same thing with the opioid settlement funds. Denise, why don't you come up? If there are any changes to what you presented last week, I think bring them up to speed, and then if there are any questions.
Good afternoon. So you did have some changes to your documents, but there wasn't substantive changes. It was alphabetized to make it a little bit easier to navigate. One thing I did not mention last week that I would just like to point your attention to is that you'll notice there's significantly less dollars under the behavioral health maintenance of effort for our mobile integrated healthcare program. The reason for that is you'll recall we have a $12.5 million agreement with the state of North Carolina for crisis services, and our construction and upfit at the Highland Avenue Center has been delayed. The primary use of those funds was initially to be for operations at the Highland Avenue Center. And while we'll still need a significant amount of those dollars for that, we also may have some dollars left on the table. So the state has given us verbal approval, and the contract is forthcoming to adjust that budget so that we can include $850,000 to help fund mobile integrated healthcare this coming year. So that's the reason for the reduction. It's not a reduction in the actual service. It's just a differently combined funding sources. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
I've got, well, two. One is, what is the length of time that before the 12.5 million, what was it intended? Does it have a reversion? What is it?
So we have a plan for spending at this point. We have to obligate all those dollars by December of 2024 and then spend them by 2026. They're ARPA dollars.
Okay, and that's on the capital part of the construction piece, basically.
It is capital and operations.
So the operation can also be extended through that time.
It can, so long as it's been obligated.
All right. Second question is on the Daymark Recovery Services proposal, which
Yes.
is just on the, I guess, the third page that you gave us on the, there's in the notes, it says, note that there's 190,000 available through the 12.5. So is that a part, that 190 part of the 850?
No, it is separate from that, but it is a part of the 12 million, and it was funded or budgeted that way initially. We used those dollars this year as well for security, and the purpose of the security is to allow us to have the infrastructure to serve a higher acuity patient and hopefully divert them from hospitals.
Got it. Are you ready for questions, other questions?
Absolutely.
Within the list?
Of course.
I only have a couple. Again, I admire you for all the, I mean, there's a lot of work for doing all this, and I'm going to get at a little bit of one of my questions, but I had one specific one, and it is over on the School Health Alliance for Forsyth County providers. It was one that basically was funded through Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools ESSER funding.
Correct.
And it basically provided 5 behavioral professionals continued service. Of course, that's expiring for them.
Yes.
And they're looking to continue that kind of service, which I think all of us would be supportive of. The question becomes, they're also looking at a different federal grant that could continue that would serve 8 schools. And I'm kind of curious about this. I guess theoretically, they have to have everything obligated by, there's a different cycle, by September 30th. So they have to spend it by December 31st, but I don't know about it. I don't know if that applies to HR, to personnel, for example. You can obligate it, I guess, in your budget and say this, but what I'm getting at is, I'm looking at the bridge. I don't know what length of time it will be before they get their answer to their federal grant, and if they got it, you'd hate to see the thing end if it's a matter of months. And I'm wondering if they have built that into their regular budget. I mean, the school district has discretionary dollars that they can switch back and forth. We just see their overall increase. We don't see all the nitty-gritties of lots of their stuff. So
Sure.
do you know the answer to that?
I do
Because I
not.
noticed you purposely chose not to get into because of the grant.
I do not, but I'm happy to try to find that out for you.
That'd be a helpful thing to
Sure.
know that it's so that you don't have all these people disappear and get snapped up somewhere when they've probably been working 2 full years doing this work. Be nice to know. And then the other part is, do we have a fund balance remaining in this maintenance of effort piece?
We do. It's about $500,000
I'll see.
if you do approve the recommended use of fund balance that's attached to this.
Right, and so that would be a matter, that could be a consideration for partial funding to keep people until you get the grant application, and the grant application ends. Of course, with that kind of uncertainty, the people may leave anyway.
Right.
You don't know.
Chairman Martin, I just want to add, the review committee, the other piece of our deliberation was that we do fund School Health Alliance, and they already provide mental health services to all schools. And so we felt like the schools would still be receiving the services. They would just not have this extra this extra thing that they're currently funding with ESSER dollars that we also did not feel like we could sustain at such a high level with the behavioral health dollars that we currently have.
Well, and I'm not in favor of doing that. I was simply, if they have another source of money that may stretch it out for another 3 years of support, I'm just guessing that's likely the case, and you're looking at a matter of months, that's something that we really could cover within fund balance, if that's the case, if they haven't covered it. I'm kind of curious what they have anticipated in that. And the last question, I'll be done. The last question is more of, a lot of these proposals, and this includes the mental health funds too, the opioid funds, and I agree with the idea of paying for, we're going to pay for 52 sessions. We're going to pay for 52 people are participants in this. We're going to pay for XYZ, kind of those things. And there's so many organizations, just the number of organizations represented, independent organizations in these two grant lists, the maintenance of effort and opioid, money, the funds, is keeping up with unduplicated counts of those. And whether it's kind of like, I can tell you it's an unduplicated count, but you got to have you got to have good electronic data, and you have to be able, and that's being followed, and all those, because I used to worry different times in my previous life of paying for things twice with a lot of different funds, and that person, that session, that whatever gets paid for multiple times. Plus, you know that the per unit cost, there's an infrastructure for that organization, and you're paying how many times you pay for a piece of that infrastructure of the organization if it gets bigger, and then the people it ends up that the real supporting the infrastructure is a whole lot more than they need. So those are and I don't see us with the capabilities to figure all that out.
Right. We do rely on them largely to tell us what is duplicated and unduplicated. One area that we have looked deeper is when there's multiple funding sources for the
Yes.
same thing that we're providing.
Yes.
Then we have the ability to look at that with more acuity.
Do you actually see that they have the electronic data keeping record systems to do all that kind of stuff?
We've not done site visits for these, and that's a really good idea, maybe something we could implement for next year. So no, we don't actually look at their data. Daymarks I've absolutely seen, and been able to see what their QM system looks like and look at it with more of kind of a compliance lens. But that is absolutely something we could implement next year.
Yeah, then it's kind of like, it's sort of like verifying
Right.
that you have the capabilities to give this data, to provide this data.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Other questions for Denise?
I was just going to make a comment. Obviously, we take these are sort of foundational to the budget that we're putting together now, and getting these decisions out of the way really do let you get to some of the other stuff you're talking about. We did have a meeting this week with Tommy really around the school's budget and dug a little bit deeper. And there's a few questions that popped up around because they're asking for nurses. We've got nurse requests coming out of our budget, and so I think, and we're going to meet again in 2 weeks to kind of finalize that. So I think all that will be really, really helpful. What was my other point? I think the other thing kind of slipped out of my mind, but you will. The other piece was. As he went down what their request looks like, he was able to articulate what was ESSER, what was coming to you because they were losing funding from ESSER. And so as we present their budget, you'll be able to see it in that form. So I think that'll make it clear.
That'll help. Good.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. Are you doing both of these, looking at the mental health part? I only have one question in the mental health group, and that was on the, for SciTech. And I think there's just one for SciTech request.
There's one under maintenance of effort and one under opioid settlement.
There was. I did not have a question about it. This one, just simply in the section that's kind of it's the column before notes, which was, what that column is other FY24 amounts paid. year-to-date, and it just had, and this particular one for SciTech, it had three. It had ARPA was $72,000, Human Resources, it says $225. I don't know if that's
That was really it.
I don't-
That-
What, just
that-
225?
it was
But then it
225.
said for SciTech, 30 million.
So is that funding that flows through us to Forsyth Tech? I'm looking to Dudley and Chantel.
We just attempted to put all of the other funding sources that organizations receive, and Denise received those numbers from the finance department. So we were just trying to show which organizations receive other funding streams from us.
Okay. Well, I'd say it's paying for the things that they budget for with us, which is security, buildings, maintenance, utilities, and that kind of stuff. So quite frankly, those things would not be available to pay for these things.
Correct.
If that's what that's intended to show.
That is absolutely it. This is literally the dollars that we have given or passed through or paid to an organization, not necessarily for the same services.
I got you. I'd say probably you could leave that kind of stuff off when you know it's not related, because it kind of doesn't mean
Well,
anything.
I guess for us, we've been asked by some commissioners that they want to know what other funds organizations receive from us, whether it's relevant to mental health or opioids or not. So that's the reason we put it on the list, just for general awareness and FYI, just so you know what funds. Forsyth Tech is probably just not a good example, but there are certainly others that receive county funds. And you'll see something similar, just in a little bit of a different format, when Aisha Carter presents special appropriations. Again, it's just more for general awareness, so you know other sources of funds that individuals receive.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think the
and it
question.
is helpful for like JCPC. There were a number of JCPC grants in this group, and I agree. They're for something different, but it is nice to know they're a JCPC provider too.
And in some cases, for JCPC as an example, we may be providing funds for Family Services is a great example. They get JCPC funds, and it is for mental health counseling through JCPC, plus they get behavioral health counseling, plus they get ARPA funds, plus they get special appropriations. And so it just depends, but in some instances, it's not relevant to the same, I guess, type of service.
And I think the questions come up from time to time is because there really is money that can come through a lot of different places with the county, and sometimes it's money that you give to the schools, and the schools fund them with local money that really just ended up being money that, so the question that had come up was, to what extent is the organization really just supported by Forsyth County in you know, or which kind of happens with some, so.
Yeah, it's just that, the 30 million sends you in a little, this particular isolated one sort of jumps out. But I get it, and that's helpful. I'm glad you just clarified it.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Denise on either maintenance of effort or the opioid grants?
No, but Denise, I appreciate what you do. It's very useful to me.
Very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denise. All right. Agenda item 9, it has lots of parts to it, and it's got a fairly significant presentation that Kimberly Bussey with Budget Management, she has sort of helped us put together this presentation, and this is also really a foundational part of preparing the FY25 budget, because it is kind of reconciliation of our FY23, the 23 fund balance, which was outlined in the FY24 budget ordinance. And so, as we had mentioned at the winter work session and some other times, that because we were so late coming with the PAYGO decisions, which would normally have come to you in November or December, we just kind of pushed them off to this year's budget. And it's actually been kind of helpful, because as we've gone through budget meetings with departments and looked at what they were requesting, we actually have pulled out some capital out of that and really put it into here in a way to balance this next year's budget, particularly knowing that we had a $6 million ARPA shortfall that we're trying to deal with, that we believe, and we really do, this is part of closing that gap. You'll notice when Ms. Bussey goes through this, when you take the PAYGO dollars that have spun up out of FY23 closing out, and then the inflation reserve dollars, there's actually about $5 million left that we are saying we're not making recommendations for spending on. We'll put that sort of on the shelf as we go into this next year's budget, and we'll take that number plus the $3 million or so that we think will be able to flow up from the ARPA revenue loss as we close all that out. So all this is going to kind of converge into a spending plan. So, but we are bringing you a lot of projects. Some of them, because of timing, are coming to you at the time where we've got a GMP almost ready to go, kind of ready to move forward with a project. And so Kimberly's going to be the master of ceremonies for this presentation, and she'll step you through it. And we've got a number of different speakers, but it's important, it's big, it's a lot of money, and it really is foundational to next year's budget. So.
That's right. Thank you, Dudley. Good afternoon, Commissioners. So I'm here today to facilitate this conversation about 2023 PAYGO. And during this discussion, we will get a little help from our CFO to step through a high-level overview of the PAYGO calculation, so how we came to the available balance that we did. We will discuss a draft list of fiscal year 23 PAYGO projects and a brief description of each. And finally, Kyle Wolf, Budget Director, will help us step through the agenda item that you see, which does appropriate fund balance to establish a 2023 PAYGO capital project ordinance and amends some additional CPOs to accept 2023 PAYGO if the projects are currently underway. So we'll start first, I think, with our CFO to give you a brief overview of the PAYGO calculation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Before I jump too deeply into the details of the PAYGO calculation that are coming from the fiscal 23 audit, I wanted to give you a quick update on where we are with that audit. We are about 90% of the way through. All of the governmental fund information has been supplied to the auditors. They've had that now for several weeks. That's the information on the general fund, the internal service fund, the special revenue funds, the capital project funds, really about 90% of what we report on. They've had that for several weeks. They're going through their procedures and their testing. They're requesting supplemental information, which we're providing, and answering questions. All seems to be going pretty well. The remaining portion that we have to complete is when we move from the modified accrual approach of accounting to full accrual. And we are almost all the way through that. We have one segment of the system that is being stubborn and not producing the information as we would expect to see it. We're working with a consultant to try and work through that. We know what the numbers should be. And once we get those numbers final, we'll be able to knock this out very, very quickly. I'll be meeting in the morning to get an update on where we are on it and to game plan if we need to consider doing all of those calculations outside the system. Don't want to go there, but we want to get this done. We're shooting for a March issue date to have the audit complete.
So those are primarily around fixed assets, so it's not the core part of the accounting piece. It really is the fixed asset reporting, that which is important, but particularly for a...
It is important, and we only report the fixed assets when we report on full accrual, which is really only in the financial report. And so there's just a number of different steps we need to go through to extract that information from the governmental statements and actually create the assets as they sit on the balance sheet for a full accrual.
But you do expect the full budget, the full audit report and the full certification of all that stuff done before July 1?
We are hoping it'll be done before the end of May. And if we cannot get the system to execute what we need it to, we are looking at whether or not we can do it manually to make sure we continue and get this done. Yes, we're making every effort to have it completed.
And I'm sorry, you said March issue date, did you?
I meant May, I'm sorry.
I figured she meant
I meant May, I'm sorry.
Since we were in April.
The months are running together.
Hopefully not March 2025.
No.
Oh, 2025, yeah, thank you. That's good.
No, and please, and hopefully I won't be here standing talking about the 24 budget at that point, or audit. So if we want to jump into how PAYGO is calculated, because I think seems to always be questions in how the net change from operations correlates with the PAYGO amount that you're presented with. And really, I guess I can say is there's a connection between the net change in fund balance, but not necessarily a correlation directly with PAYGO. There's a connection, but not a correlation with PAYGO. So in front of you, I have given you a lot of detail of what actually goes into the components of fund balance, more detail than I wanted to put on a slide. I'm going to step through the slides here on a pretty high level, but if you want to see the more specific information, it is in front of you there.
Yeah, you've got a hard copy.
At your
of
place, yes.
that. Okay.
So essentially, we look at, fund balance at the end of the year is the amount to which your revenues exceeded your expenditures for the year. And you see there at the top of the PowerPoint as it's presented, we ended last fiscal '22 with $210 million in fund balance. Net change coming out of '23 was just under $9 million. So at the conclusion of fiscal '23, we had $219 million in fund balance. Total fund balance for the county. Your PAYGO policy requires that, or stipulates that after all designations of fund balance are completed, and we have set aside 14% of the next year's budget as a completely unassigned, undesignated portion of fund balance, anything that's left after that can be used for PAYGO. And that is exactly the calculation we go through. If you start at the top with $219 million, we then step through making designations. Some of these are required by statute. Some of them are required by our grantors or debt agreements. Some are because of actions that you as a board have already taken and stated that you want to reserve some fund balance. And some are just accounting treatments. Essentially, what the statutes are attempting to do is looking at our fund balance, they're going to say, what truly is available to you to spend to support next year's budget? So the first thing they look to do is say, any of the revenues represented in your fund balance that are not cash, you cannot use toward your next year's budget. So the very first line there of what is restricted by statute, roughly $50.3 million, $45 million of that comes from the receivables that we have at the end of the year and open contracts that we have. Receivables are not cash. They may represent revenue. They're in our fund balance. But since they're not cash, the statute says you cannot use those to appropriate and support your next year's budget. We have to hold that portion of fund balance out in reserve. That moves into restricted. Any open contracts we have at the end of the year, meaning we already have obligations to pay for services that are ongoing and being provided, we have to reserve a portion of fund balance to make sure that we can meet those obligations in the upcoming fiscal year. That's your amount for encumbrances. We then restrict a portion of your behavioral health dollars and airport operations. So the results of the extent to which we didn't meet our MOE, any unspent MOE gets held in fund balance because we have a requirement to spend that for those purposes going forward. Airport operations, revenues that is generated from the revenue must be held to support only airport operations. Moving down into the next section, we have committed. That represents actions that you as a board have taken to reserve fund balance for specific purposes. And to undo that reservation would require you to act as well. The majority of that money sitting in that classification is your debt leveling plans, which represents about $40 million of the $47.6 million that has been committed. It's where you have levied a tax, and we calculate how much revenue that tax has generated. We subtract from it the debt service that has been paid during that year, and the remaining balance goes into that committed fund balance line. So it will not be used to support anything other than future debt service. Assigned, the majority of the $16.3 million in assigned fund balance is the portion of fund balance that you had already used to balance the fiscal '24 budget. So just under $15 million. The amount that you used to balance the '24 budget that was not already otherwise restricted or committed. You used some behavioral health money to balance the budget. You used some of the debt leveling fund balance. That's not included in that $15 million. That $15 million would simply come from what is not otherwise restricted or committed, fund balance that was used to balance the '24 budget. Then you have a fund balance policy that says you want to see 14% of the next year's budget unassigned, uncommitted, unrestricted, completely available. Your cushion, the safety net, the rainy day. You know, if something doesn't go right in your budget and you need something to fall back on. That's your 14%. It comes out to $79.8 million. So we started at $219 million. We filled all of those designations all the way through, including the 14%. And then as your policy stipulates, anything that's left after we do that is available for PAYGO. One-time projects that don't require ongoing support from the budget is available for you to make discretionary decisions for usage. So also in the sheet in front of you, I give you a little bit of a side-by-side with last year. Last year, we had about $22 million in PAYGO. This year, we have 29. You know, the overall fund balance increased 9. But you can see how the different allocations shifted during the year. You were required to use more to meet your 14% policy because your budget has grown. You used almost $1 million more to balance the 24 budget than you did to balance the 23 budget. So again, while results of operation change the overall size of your fund balance, it's really what allocations have to be made along the way that determines the ultimate PAYGO amount. Do you have any questions on that, or is that information helpful, or?
Well, it's very helpful. Okay. That's very helpful. In fact, I've kind of wondered about this for a long time. This is very clear. But the interesting question is the line item on appropriations for subsequent year's budget. So, for example, I guess for the FY, it's how much of that ends up getting spent is usually a very small number. And I remember, I think one year we had just in shoring up our insurance sort of fund balance on health insurance, we had somewhere the $2 to $3 million kind of dollar range. But usually that number is a very small number, or in fact it is zero. I suspect that, and so essentially when you're really talking about, yes, because that number is what we choose to appropriate based on what we do, and if it's the parts that build up, if you will, there are various contingencies that make up that amount that are throughout the budget that end up making up that number, because that shores up and makes the budget balanced at the time we approve it. So in reality, you're looking at a $10, $12 million that's actually in addition to, I guess it probably what's part of what was not spent is what ends up making up that 24.
Yes, and that's really.
Is what's not spent, it's what was not spent in 2022, that of the appropriation. In fact, you could argue, it's not really the difference between the 24,945 and the 13,901. The 24,945 is your PAYGO number for FY23. And then you go back up to 22, there's a 13,901. It's not really that difference because you didn't that more money is making that up. It's not just coming from that, it's coming from other things. I got to think a little bit more about that, where it's coming. It's coming from other contingencies, not just that. But that's a big one. Maybe I don't quite understand it. I need to work on that a little more, think through that part. But it's helpful to have it out this way because it kind of shows, you're right, it's sort of kind of related to fund balance.
That's why I said.
To the change in fund balance.
There's a connection,
sort of
but not a
related.
correlation.
Yeah, kind of, I get it. That's helpful. I'll probably digest it a little more privately, so I don't think out loud. It's not good.
Very good.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry. All right, so as a just general reminder about PAYGO, PAYGO funds are primarily used for 3 reasons: debt avoidance, projects with a positive return on investment, and economic development.
Yeah, and I would probably add, just because it is a very unusual year and we have, for 3 years we've relied on ARPA revenue loss. It was, if you think about what you did when the ARPA opportunity came up, you made a decision to lower the tax rate for 3 years. And so maybe for this 1 year, kind of a fourth consideration really has been, how do we how do we extend out this ARPA, this tax reduction you gave to kind of push things into a year where you're going to be doing a revaluation anyway. And so, I think kind of we've always been really big on full disclosure on what's going on. We'll be real clear with that in our budget that we submit to you that, hey, we recognize that we are, that all things being equal, we would, there'd be a tax rate increase this year. We're going to avoid that this year, understanding that as you look at next year's, the 26 budget with the revaluation in, you'll take that into consideration. And it'll change. You'll have to do a revenue neutral calculation and fully disclose that in 2026, and this will be part of that. So that's kind of what I think is Chantel and I and Kyle and the kind of the team have been talking about is sort of the strategy around that. So there is, for this year, there's kind of a fourth criteria where we've pulled a few things over that maybe otherwise, when we looked at the three criteria that we normally use, we might not have used as.
Right, and so in that context, the summary that you're seeing here does show the available 2023 PAYGO balance that Terry mentioned at the very top at $24.9 million. And it also, you'll see that inflation contingency number of $3,275,990 in the context of these projects that we're going to discuss in a moment. And that really is a kind of a larger view that Dudley just talked about for to be able to use these, to be able to fund these projects and then have that amount you see at the bottom, that $5,168,000, to be able to possibly use to help balance the fiscal year 25 manager's recommended budget. So that's sort of what you'll see as we look into this.
And you'll
these
note
projects.
the asterisk by inflation contingency in 2022 PAYGO because on the projects, we've identified those that we're really recommended funding with the PAYGO, with the inflationary reserve. And so you'll see that asterisk, and that's what that relates to, is we're saying those dollars we're directing toward these projects.
That's right. So now we'll take a look at a list of, this is a draft PAYGO projects list. And this group of projects were actually included in section 19 of the fiscal year 24 budget ordinance. And they were listed as projects to be considered if sufficient PAYGO funding was available. You will, as Dudley mentioned, you'll notice there's a couple of projects here that have an asterisk. Those are two of the projects that have been sort of designated as possible use for these inflation contingency dollars. And you'll also notice that there is a original column and a revised column. The original column was as it was listed in the budget ordinance. The revised are some changes that have happened since then in these discussions. So I'll give a brief overview of each of these projects, and we will talk about when we get there what some of those revisions are and why. And I think we'll have maybe Chris Weevil from Parks come up and talk about one of these items in particular to give you a little more detail about it. So the first project you'll see here is the Public Safety Center improvements, a raised floor. This project has been completed. It was time sensitive and in connection to the Public Safety Center upfit project. It needed to be done for that project to be finished, and the Sheriff's Office was able to use some general fund dollars to complete that project. So you notice it's not included in recommended projects here. Radio consoles for the Sheriff's Office dispatch. This project is a replacement of consoles and workstations the 911 telecommunicators are using in the Sheriff's Office. They're about 10 years old. They are damaged. Some of them are not working well. And you will notice that there was a substantial increase from the last we discussed this and from what was listed in the fiscal year 24 budget. And as such, it's included as use for those inflation contingency dollars. Unfortunately, this project is not eligible for use by 911 funds at this time. So that's why you'll find it on this list. The Family Justice Center security cameras, this is a replacement of their current system. As you can imagine, safety is an important component of the work that they do at that facility. The photovoltaic solar project at county parks and facilities, this is an item that we're going to have Chris Weevil come up and talk to you about at the very end here. So we'll come back to this one. So, but you'll notice that there is a change in what was included in the 24 budget and what you see on this list, and Chris can talk a little bit about that in just a moment. The Focus replacement, is for 200, or I'm sorry, for 540,000, is a DSS case management system. This system is over 20 years old, and this really does work to improve business processes in DSS. The Monarch,
And I'll just say, this is one of them that we actually developed in-house, so this is actually transferring to a third-party system. You know, the staff that originally developed that, or many of them are not here, and so we've got some exposure on this one. So.
By the way, what does it's the old HRIS system, what does HRIS stand for?
that's a good question, but it is the system that our human resources system used at the time. This is when we had performance, we had an HRIS system. We've since moved into a new system that's wrapped into Oracle, so I think it's not supported.
So this is an HR system, not a DSS system.
It was tied to the county's old human resource information system, so it was pulling information from that system that no longer exists.
It's the one that, day sheets that DSS workers have to, so it uses the payroll data to make sure that we get the funding back based on where people spend their time. It's almost like a internal billing system, actually, to the state.
So where did I read, and I can't see it immediately, but I did read this, that basically this was a budget to get an RFP together, to get a consultant to help decide what to get, to go with, that matches our ERP system? Did I read that? Am
You
I
did read that,
saying
that's
that
true.
correctly?
That's right. And so the request allows a county to begin the RFP process to seek an enterprise software solution that's specific to the HHS agencies to replace the system. So there,
So is this something that we expect to be in the millions when we get through this process?
I can answer that question.
We believe that this amount will allow us to replace the system.
Okay.
So this is
This
not-
includes, so do we need a contract with somebody to prepare the?
We should not. We plan to do that ourselves with our MIS team. I think what they were trying to say on the write-up is that this would allow us to move forward with a process to start to replace it. But in absence of having money available, then we would not start an RFP process. It's probably the way in which it was worded.
Okay. Yeah, I immediately conjured up what the RFP services were for the ERP. I mean, we've got the alphabet here that we're dealing with. And that was, which was all of this, all that translated into millions, and all of it is translated into lots of heartburn, which I will not repeat, but I will just simply say that I hope this wasn't going to start us down a similar road. And what I hear you is that you believe for $500,000 roughly, we're going to be able to replace the human resource, whatever IS is for, integrated system, who knows what it is.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So for the Monarch building improvements, the amount listed here is $3.8 million. This is a vacant facility on the Health and Human Services campus that has been envisioned for a future expansion facility for a broader range of service. So the goal of this facility is that it would complement existing services and provide wraparound services for the folks that use the services over at, it's in close proximity to public health, to DSS, to the Family Justice Center, the dental clinic, and some others. And so the goal is for programming to support those types of county programs. The library branch upfits to address system disparities at $2.5 million. The 2010 bond referendum provided funds to renovate the Central Library, Kernersville, and Clemens branches. This funding would allow for various upgrades to address disparities in library programming across all branches. The campground expansion at Tanglewood Park, $750,000. Tanglewood Park, as you know, has a vehicle campground with 44 campsites. It does very well, revenues over expenditures, and the campground have exceeded $200,000 for several years. And this funding will assist in moving forward with the expansion of the campground to allow for more sites.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
may I ask, how could I get a tour of the proposed expansion area? See what it would be displaced by this?
Sure. I think Chris Weevil is here today, and I'm sure he'd be happy to set something up with you whenever you're available.
Very good. Thank you.
Festival of Lights display enhancement, this is $250,000. This is for either new or refurbished displays for Festival of Lights. It's looking to enhance visitors' experience. Next is Ballew's Lake Phase 2, $2.5 million. This is the second phase of the Ballew's Lake Park. The planned site is very similar to the first phase. It's an estimated 20 acres. And grant funding is currently being pursued for this phase of the park, but it is unlikely to cover the full amount of this project expansion, and so this 2.5 is needed as well. The Tanglewood Park Yadkin River Outlook for $175,000. The Yadkin River Trail System at Tanglewood Park is a beautiful area of rich and natural landscape with abundant wildlife. There are wetlands, meadows, and it's by the river. It is a popular location for bird watching. This item would allow for improved accessibility of the site. It would make the area ADA accessible and inclusive. And finally, ballot on-demand printers, $130,000. This was listed in the fiscal year '24 budget at $63,000. And as such, it's been designated as a possible item for use for the inflation contingency dollars. There's also some additional laptops that have been added in this since the discussion in the '24 budget. This is a replacement of the current printing system for Board of Elections. This will support, well, I should say that the current printer has no longer serving, I think, the United States. They're moving to China. And I think the Board of Elections is a little bit nervous about being able to access parts and service. And so this is a good option to move to this printer. Otherwise, they would need to go to ordering pre-printed ballots, which there's some cost and supply waste by going that route.
Yeah, this one pays for itself pretty quickly because you don't have to have as many printed ballots as you would otherwise that basically end up getting thrown away. So this does it lets you basically print on demand. So from a financial perspective, it's an easy one. Yeah.
Right. So we're going to jump back up now unless there's any additional questions about these items. We're going to jump.
I got a couple.
Sure.
And I understand, I guess Chris is going to talk about the photovoltaic cell projects at the park specifically, and we've actually had, I think, got discussed briefly at another session, but for that single project, I think I sort of understand that. I think we need to do more of those. But the other general question I have is, these are, FY24 is going to end in about 3 months, and I'm curious of these budgeted amounts. How many of these things, only one of them is completed? One of them, we have an idea what the scope is going to be on the basically the photocell, the solar project at the park. Are any of the rest of these already underway? Are these already started? They're not spent yet because these are just what the budget was for FY24. Have we started any of these projects?
Yeah,
Because it has to look like if you were going from this, you'd say, well, the only thing we got done was we got the raised floor at the public, safety center done, and we've got a budget for the solar cell project.
Yeah, but generally speaking, we don't. We did the public safety center improvement raised floor because we really had to, because the project was getting finished over there. And so, for PAYGO projects, we really don't put them on the list if they are have-tos. And, with ballot on demand printer, we knew it was going to be later when we needed it. So it was fine for it to be delayed. But if you look at what will go very quickly, if you approve this next Thursday, is radio consoles will happen very quickly. The Family Justice Center security cameras, that work's really already been done, so that'll go quickly. The photovoltaic solar project is actually GMP ready to go. Yeah. You can do that immediately. Focus replacement is going to take some time, although there's some work that has been done on it because we know we're going to have to migrate off that. The Monarch building improvements, that is a future, more of a vision project. The library branch upfits, we've done some work on because we know we've got some deferred maintenance, but those really are going to be refresh kinds of projects. And so those will come on through, but it'll take a bit. Campground expansion, we've done a little work on, but until we get the green light from the board, we wouldn't move on that. Festival of Lights display enhancements, we generally have that process, and we try to refresh part of the Festival of Lights every year, but this, in reality, wouldn't do it this year. It'd probably do it for the next year Festival of Lights. Blues Lake Phase 2, we've done a lot of work on, but that really is a future project. Tanglewood Park Overlook, we actually are pretty far along with, so I think we're good there, but I'll let.
That's an example of a project that started and going on.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, and then Ballot on Demand will be purchased pretty quickly. So it's kind of a mix of both of those. But Chris can talk to you about the solar project, and you may want to mention some of the other ones as well. So.
Slides.
All right, this is the, good afternoon. This is the Tanglewood Park photovoltaic solar project. We're asking for $164,000 for that. As Dudley mentioned, the technical work, design work is basically done. We're really ready to go once we are given directions on the system size. The company Renew has submitted a proposal of $100,000 for the base system. If you see the upper picture there, that is the base system. It is $100,000 for 40 kilowatt AC, or they've given for option number 2, a max system of 91.68 kilowatts DC, 70 kilowatts AC for an additional $64,000. The solar array will consist of solar panels installed along the rooftop. This is the maintenance facility at Tanglewood. And it will give us an anticipated generating capacity of 70 kilowatts AC. Staff are hopeful that the proposed additional funding of $164,000 in the 2023 PAYGO Capital Projects Ordinance will be adequate to complete the maximum system projects, and that's with or without battery storage. We've looked into some battery storage as an option 3, but it's very, very expensive. I don't think that we can get it through that, so we've kind of backed away from that. But once we make a decision here, we're pretty much ready to go with either option 1 or option 2. But the 164 would get us to option 2, and that is the max size.
And so when he refers to maximum size, it's what the Duke Energy is saying that they'll essentially buy back from you. And so that puts, so we've sort of matched it with that.
And we're going to get a federal energy reimbursement. Once we send it all in, they'll send us back X percent. I forget what it is. We're going to get some back, even addition, not just selling the power.
Minor can speak to that a little bit better than I can.
Once we actually pay the bill and show we did it, right?
30%?
30%?
Yes.
So 30% of that actually comes back. Plus, we'll be able to get some rebate on the energy that we sell to them. And that's kind of a general question. If you had a storage battery, if you had one, expensive one, could store it, it's kind of like, what is that giving you that you're at least selling the excess energy that you don't need? I realize it could be used on other days, I guess you could argue, but other times. But I'm trying to look at and maybe the advantage of the Duke Energy picking up the excess, kilowatts that are available, they're going to give us a credit for that. And I guess that's not anywhere close to what you get if you had the battery, the storage battery that you could call upon on rainy days or when you need more energy.
Right. So for this particular project at this facility, the battery would not provide a lot of additional cost savings in operations beyond acting as a backup power supply in the event of a power outage. In a different application where demand fluctuations might be greater and result in demand increase cost in the form of demand fees. A battery backup could be used to manage the load and avoid some of those peaks in demand of the building and save some money and help be more cost effective.
So for this application, no advantage particularly, limited advantage.
Right, correct.
Probably never gets to the demand. Well, depends how Duke Energy is calculating when you reach the demand, what all's included in the acquire. If it's for single building demand, this would never get it, I take it.
Right.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
And are there other projects like this at Tanglewood or at the parks? No other?
No. There is an extremely small set of solar panels on a building beside the swimming pool, but it's so small that we typically don't mention it because, I mean, this project we're looking at is over 140 solar panels, and whenever the swimming pool is like 4 panels.
Right. Which would be a waste. Yeah, I got it. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you'd like me to, I can go through a couple of the other projects that we had for the Parks Department. This is the campground expansion. The area to the is planned north. The area to the north of that is where we're looking to do some expansion. As Kimberly mentioned, we've got 44 reservable sites with full utility hookups, water, sewer, electricity, and what is now purported to be the best Wi-Fi system of any campground in the area. So very good there. We get lots and lots of compliments on our Wi-Fi system, so thank you very much for that. But between fiscal year 17 and 23, our occupancy rates averaged about 71% for the period. Weekday occupancy in that period was 60%. Weekend occupancy is 83%. So it's very hard to get a site at any time. Most people book, if they leave today, they book for next year, the same period, which is great. Between fiscal year 19 and FY 23, as Kimberly mentioned, our net revenue averaged right at $250,000. Occupancy rates basically increased on average about 3% per year between FY 17 and FY 22. Did have a slight decline in FY 23. But all campers do receive a survey when they leave, after they check out. One of the regular responses has been for additional sites, additional RV sites, and another regular response has been to modify a couple of our existing sites. I think if you can see kind of the topography, there's 6 or 8 sites here and 6 or 8 sites there. They're just not as level as some of these Class A RVs like. Just tougher for them to set up. So this request would include a small feasibility study to help us determine the optimum number of sites to build and which existing sites would need to be modified. We anticipate the need right now being 10 to 20 new sites and modifications to 8 or 10 of the existing sites.
Any questions? Any other questions for Chris?
Keep going.
Look,
Yeah,
project a
can
little
do.
bit. Got anything on that one?
All right, the Tanglewood Accessible Yadkin River Nature Trail, we've got $175,000. The Yadkin River Nature Trail at Tanglewood was established in the 2010s in collaboration with Forsyth Audubon. It is a 2.5-mile trail that borders the Yadkin River for about half of its distance, and then meanders through the native warm season grass fields that we have kind of on the very southern edge of Tanglewood Park. The trail crosses into and out of several distinct habitats in this area. One of the drawbacks to this underdeveloped area of the park is accessibility or for persons with disabilities. The road that you kind of see here in purple, that's a gravel road. It is gated. The only time that we allow traffic to come up and down that road is when the BMX is in operation, and that's usually during the summer, in the evenings, and then on the weekends during the summer. What this project would do, of course, the area can be accessed at any time on foot, and that's what most folks are doing. We did get a request through one of the Audubon members that there wasn't any access for folks that had some disabilities. So the project would construct a platform along the wetland that's adjacent to the Yakima River Nature Trail, and that is kind of the area that you see circled in yellow. The orange line is basically just a representation of the Yakima River Nature Trail. The project would allow for access for viewing the wildlife in an area where several habitats come together. That is a wetland, and it does have a kind of an overlook into the water just by the terrain that's there now. Current preliminary plans would have this project take place kind of at the same time we're doing some planning for a Phase 4 expansion of our multi-use trail at Tanglewood, which we've got some plans for that. We just need to update those. And I do have just an overall sketch, kind of a rendering of what we're looking at for that Yakima River Nature Trail. Looking at this, it's a little hard to see, but the road is basically looking planned south. This end is planned north. To the west is the river, and this area here is basically the wetland where the overlook would be constructed.
And so the gravel road exists now. What about the orange path? Does the trail, actually, that trail exists now? Is that proposed or built?
It's a natural surface trail.
It's already done, already there.
The folks will park, the access that they park at the Shelter 3 or the Skillpot Lake pull off, and then they walk down and start the trail as it is basically on the floodplain of the river. And they start that walk there, and they end back up. It comes along the gravel road and ends back up at that parking lot. It makes a loop.
Got it. Other questions for Chris?
What, if I may, yes, what does the overlook access to that is accessible by handicapped individuals? What does it connect to?
It will, the actual Yakima River, the nature trail itself, back here, orange line here, it basically, the trail on that particular section utilizes the gravel road as part of it. So that's where they would access viewing platform.
So if the gravel road is not open, there's no handicapped access?
Only on the weekends when we have activities going at the BMX track. It's a narrow road, so we don't allow two-way traffic. We don't allow a lot of traffic on there at one time at all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris. Glad to hear that Wi-Fi is working out at campground. That's good news. So are there any other questions about this group of projects before we move on to the next? Okay. So also included on that summary page are another group of projects where the first group were identified and listed again in that section 19 of the fiscal year 24 budget book as possible projects. This group of projects were identified through various means, including fiscal year 25 budget discussions and some other discussions this fiscal year. So for this group of projects, we're going to have some folks come up and give you a brief description of them. Chantel Robinson will take the first one. We'll have Damon Sanders Pratt look at a couple of these from Parks, the Brushy Fork project. Mark Davison is here to talk about some airport projects, and then I'll come back and wrap up these last few and see if you have any questions. So Chantel?
Thank you, Kimberly, and good afternoon, Commissioners. So the public health renovation, we're requesting $4.6 million. That building was built in 1990, and it has not had any renovation since that time, with the exception of the WIC area and family planning clinic that was done in 2007. It needs an upfit of clinic spaces, the main lobby area, part of the lower level. Quite honestly, there's other areas of the building that needs to be done as well, but this would at least get us going on that project. The board did approve $1 million for the clinic area several pay-goes ago, but we quickly realized that was not enough money to do anything. We did have a design done by Jimmy Norwood. This is an estimate, of course. The total project for the clinic area plus an area downstairs in the nursing area and health education, total project cost is $7.8 million. We have $3.4 million that we've identified. One was the $1 million from the PAYGO you all approved. You all had also approved $2.5 million for just beautification of the campus, and so we could pull some of those dollars in as well. But this would allow us to start renovating that building. I'm a strong proponent for making sure that our buildings serve all residents and is very welcoming. And quite honestly, I'd love to walk you all around the public health building, but there are some areas that's just deplorable for our residents. It's just not acceptable. And so I'd like our clinics to look like if they were going to a private practice, that there's definitely some things, I mean, it needs some work. So that's where we are on public health renovation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'll do a next couple here. The first one is the Ag Park. And so the county has received a GMP proposal from Shellco. With an additional $3.1 million to the budget that we have today, which is at 16.9, which will take it to around $20 million, what will be completed is the substantial grading work, which has already started, 2,000 linear foot or approximately 4/10 of a mile of drive from Doral to Cooperative Extension, 1 mile of trail, 25,940 square foot space. If you add the exhibit hall, and the office space, which would, part of that is a 7,800 square foot exhibit hall. And actually, I said 25,940. It's actually 17 plus the 7,800, 17,000 plus. And then there's a 20,000 square foot riding ring with a split rail fencing, which would really be kind of the first phase of an eventual covered arena, and then parking and minimal storage. So we received the GMP. Now, there are options that the board could do within the budget that you have at $16.9 million today, which would be to basically lop off the exhibit hall at this point, or to do a shell space of the exhibit hall at $18 million approximately, another $1.1 million, or to complete the exhibit hall as part of this project, and that would be where the additional $3.1 million would come in.
And I was going to note that as you notice the asterisk, we actually identified inflation reserve as really the funding mechanism for this. If you wanted to use inflation reserve to kind of keep the project in its totality together, if you want to scale back, we can certainly do that within the current budget. But we are ready. I think, Damon, you're ready immediately. In fact, we're on a time frame to get the project in front of you to approve GMP if you're ready to move forward with it. So that would
and the actual office building square footage is 17,587, with the exhibit hall at 8,300 for the CDs. And again, we received that, and if the board was agreeable with the GMP as received, then I would bring that in, we'd execute that, and they would go beyond the grading, because we did it in a two-part GMP, so we already approved the grading portion of it.
Do you want to show some of the design renderings on that, both with the building, the office building and Cooperative Extension, and then also with the event center component of that? So.
This is, I know you can't make up the detail in it, but essentially this would be the office space that would house Cooperative Extension, Soil and Water, Forestry, and USDA offices, and there's some meeting spaces in this main office complex. And then there's the event center exhibit hall that will be directly off of it. This is the road leading into the facility.
Could you go back to that for 1 second? I'm just trying to think, we were just at the volunteer appreciation, luncheon. I'm kind of looking at where that would likely be, something like that would be held, because I think that the event center with 8,000 square feet is way too big. Is there
meeting space here, there's 3 meeting spaces, but this one in particular is like the largest of the 3, which would likely be the equivalent of what we were sitting in, or these walls, there were, these are multiple walls, James? Yeah, so these walls can move here, which makes like a one large
So
space.
we got movable walls, is that what they are?
Yeah.
He's got a rendering, he's got an interior rendering of that that
Okay.
he can show you too.
And is there a kitchen area there's a kitchen area in this building of some sort. Where is it? I can't tell. With a little,
So on this rendering, I'm not sure, I might have to, James, if it's something that's kind of small, I can show you that, but there is a kitchen in it.
No, James.
So the kitchen will actually be at the head wall of this space here. So that space serves double duty as the demonstration kitchen and then also as event meeting space. So when it's not being used as a demonstration kitchen function, it can be used to have meetings in that space as well.
got it. Is there anything in the event center that's of a food servicey kind of,
There's a catering kitchen that will be in there. So you'll
can you point where that is?
it's going to be on this kind of left-hand side here.
Got it.
So what was the square footage of the event center, one more time? And then my second question is, will this have a leasing component to it for the community?
It will, so I'll answer your second part first. So yes, so Parks will manage this similar to what it does with Walnut Hall, Red Barn. It'll be available for public use also, in addition to staff use. And then the exhibit hall is 8,353 square feet.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And where is, you mentioned the grading, an area for like a outdoor, could be a riding ring, yes? And where is it on this site?
So that actually doesn't show up on here. I'll show you. I go back here, it has like shared parking and parts, so it's sort of in this area. It's off of this rendering. Over here, where they kind of would share the parking for larger events.
But it will be graded.
Yes.
That's great. Okay, I got it.
These are just some elevations of what the actual building will look like. A basic metal building here with some paneling to make it look a little more ornate. It's a pretty basic building. Example of what the boardroom space would look like. What an emphasis was for the department was storage and cabinet space. So you see the built-ins there, but pretty basic space. Part of the meeting room with the kitchen in the back that you can kind of see there, or at least the setup for it that James was mentioning. This is a meeting room that would be in any of the renditions that I mentioned, whether it's part with the shelled out exhibit hall or with the finished exhibit hall. This would still be part of that. Another look at that. Let's look from another direction. And then there is the what would be the exhibit hall space, which you can either shell out and not complete, or complete, and the funding that we're requesting would complete that section. And then just as an overall, really basic, the main part, staff, and then the exhibit hall. And as the manager mentioned, we actually have the GMP proposal, so we can bring that to you after we receive any feedback either here or after.
James, how much time is that, do we have on that? I mean, obviously, when they submit that, it's good for a period of time.
Yeah, so they're really pushing us to accept the GMP as soon as possible. A lot of trade suppliers nowadays, they're only holding pricing for 30 days or less. So they are carrying in their GMP number some escalation contingency, anticipating that there's always that lag between them giving us the number and the contract routing and approval process and them starting. to protect themselves and also us from some of those potential claims for cost inflation from the time that they got the number from the sub to the time that they got a PO issued to them.
Can I ask one question? I want to thank both Damon and James for kind of going over the details from Shelco on their, my first question was, how did an estimate, I had in my head a $16 million project become a $19 million project, or actually 20, in a short period of time. And we actually were able to, see it, and it still suggests some, to me, clearly some, obviously, there are market factors and marketplace things going on. Everybody knows some of that stuff, but it is pretty staggering when you had estimates done in August and estimates done in December, and there's almost $3 million difference. These are estimates by them, by Shelco. That bothered me, by the way. But put all that aside, the idea to keep it within budget is to take away the event center. So before you came up, I actually got my calculator out and was thinking a minute about, that's an 8,000 square foot, event center. And I said, well, let me see, what is that per square foot? Because I know it's 3.1 million to add it on, because that's what they said they'd deduct. So I said, what is that a square foot? And I was a little shocked to see it's exactly the same number as the overall square footage for the building included, which is 38750. So that tells me that probably the event, what they did is took the overall 19 point whatever, or whatever that number was for the building itself. It wasn't 19 for the building, but whatever it is, they did that and just used that takeoff cost of the square footage of the whole building to discount that 8,000 square feet that's got to be cheaper than the core part of the building.
So part of the increase is contingency for us, for things, say, if we run into something in the project that's unanticipated, that we'd be responsible for, that we ask them to add on, then there's money that the manager could authorize change orders for, like we traditionally have in ours. And that's probably $600,000 of that larger number, the 3.1.
That's better. That'd be a better calculation, which I will do in a minute. But anyway, I understand the issue. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I think we need to do it. So I'm prepared to support it. It's just still a little bit of heartburn over part of that, but not our fault. Any other questions for Damon and James?
So if the board's okay, I'll jump on to the next one, which is government center security. So for security improvements to some government suites and common areas that will improve the building's security profile in recognition of the new courthouse coming next door. So we would add some glass partitions. I have a couple examples here also. So the largest one, which I'll start with this one, the board has additional questions, are basically on the 4th floor. And so this is the entrance that you would take to the multipurpose room. And then this other corridor is on the other side of the snack bar that leads to the multipurpose room. And so what we would do is add hardware and proximity card access to both sides that basically kind of controls who can go into the break room. And so we've had some people already come into the facility to use the break space that didn't want to go to the courthouse. And so this is really kind of precautionary to get ahead of some things that we've seen a little bit already. There are other suites in the building that we would reconfigure so that the access points aren't unlimited. So this is, for example, finance and community and economic development. When you come to the door, the whole suite is basically open. There's no control of access to the building or to that suite space. Similarly, the attorney's office, which wouldn't take as much to prepare, there's a portal there without a door, and then there's the counter that we basically just put a plexiglass there to make it a little harder to bridge. Additionally, budget and management has basically one way in and one way out. And so they had two ways until we built EAP, and now that has taken away their second exit. So we would add another door, basically to EAP, which would be their other way out. And then we're looking at some kind of solution for the stairwell, where basically we've had people come in the building and stay in the building because they were in the stairwell and we weren't aware of it. So we'd have to figure out a way to control the access control there.
That's made it.
So this would do these kinds of projects. We had $150,000 for government-centered security generally. And we thought to use courthouse dollars for that, because that's really why we're doing it. But the nexus wasn't close enough between that project and coming to this building. So the dollars had to be used there, couldn't be used here, although we feel like it's a result of the building moving here. The next project is the Brushy Fork Creek, which you're somewhat familiar with. So the county's agreement with the city for Brushy Fork Creek mitigation project notes that the county would cover any overage beyond the grant funding and the city's contribution. And so the city contributed $300,000. We have a $300,000 Land and Water Conservation Fund grant to 2,100 linear feet of stream bank restoration adjacent to the airport. So we are looking at doing 2,100 linear feet. Originally, we were at 700 linear feet. So at a cost of about $400 a linear foot, that would be $840,000. At $285 a linear foot, it would be $600,000. And somewhere between there is where we believe that we're land. And so these dollars would help us with the overage beyond the city's contribution and then the Land and Water Conservation Fund contribution. And the work, the engineering work is going on now. They've been out, they've surveyed the site, so the work has begun. As far as what the actual cost will be, we'll have a better idea and be able to bring you back what a equivalent GMP, so to speak, would be. The next project on the list that I'll mention is the animal shelter. And so there's an outdoor shelter that houses livestock that happen to be in county custody that are either seized or found that are brought to the county. And so right now, they're stored off of Fairchild Drive, which also doubles as what the sheriff uses for impounding vehicles and will be part of the airport development, because it's right adjacent to the airport. So they're going to lose the capability to use what was formerly the old animal shelter. So they want to build back something like that houses livestock. It's pretty simple. Additionally, in that cost, as part of the Humane Solutions agenda item that you saw a couple meetings ago, where this third party will come into the shelter and provide spay-neuter services for the animal shelter and for the community. And so the space that was abandoned that I have hatched here by the Sheriff's Department would be reclaimed by Animal Services, and that they would allow Humane Solutions to use that. So it needs to be an impervious surface, so we would put in probably the equivalent of the stone hard surface there to facilitate them expand that operation a little more.
What kind of surface is there now?
It's just a regular floor that's not impervious.
But I think is it a vinyl tile on top of concrete?
Mm-hmm.
Could you just not take the tile off and seal the concrete?
Probably not. But we can, the people from the state, when they come here and they review the shelter over the last several years, we actually have a stone hard product that is specifically designed to not be impervious to their standard. And we've had to have that repaired probably 2 or 3 times. And I suspect that concrete would not be acceptable, but
Yeah, the seal is pretty much the stone hard is a sealer type material that does it, but it's just it is okay with the state vet folks. It's one of the few products they're okay with, but it is kind of a sealer.
Okay.
this next one I don't actually have a picture of, but it's just the library technology, which is replacement of the digital board. When you come into the library, there's a large digital wall there, and that has washed out. And so we're going to replace that. And that's $60,000 or thereabouts. For the parking deck cameras, the maintenance and service agreement is up on the new parking deck. So right now they have a system called Vapix there. So the new service arrangement that Vapix has proposed is $80,000 for 3 years, or about $27,000 a year. And so these are the cameras that are in there now. There are 63 cameras, I believe, in there today. We replaced those with the Verkada system, which we have in the new courthouse, at Animal Services, and at the Sheriff's Office is also trying to get, which has additional capabilities beyond what the Vapix system does. It is a 10-year agreement, but the equivalent is $12,000 a year. So it's $120,000 over 10 years versus the $80,000 over 3 that Vapix is asking. So we are requesting to move forward with the Verkada camera system versus the Vapix system.
Which also ties into the camera system at the new courthouse.
And Animal Services right now, and that the sheriff is looking at in his space in the public safety building.
Yeah.
And those are the projects on the list that I have.
Any other questions for Damon?
Mr. Chairman, could we take about a 5-minute break? We have several more items.
Okay, we'll take 5.
All right.
Mark Davidson. Question, who's a little bit disappointed they weren't chosen for the Trivia Pursuit game. So.
Hey,
all right.
You have to.
You guys are, we'll sign you. Excuse me. We're welcome to have as many as we can get. So
Okay.
we were,
Sign
in
me
fact,
up.
the reason that Chantel's husband's game is because we had cancellations at the last minute. We need to. Hey, you're on the list next year.
All right, we'll go through this real quick, airport stuff. If you remember, due to the terminal renovations, we're taking out the car wash that's needed for our rental car companies, and we thought there could be some synergy with the county vehicles and school system vehicles, so we looked around the airport for the best location, and it's behind 3810, behind 3820, across the street near the railroad tracks at North Liberty Street. But due to the current market and the site work required to run the water and the sewer and the stormwater, we're going to need some additional funding to get the project completed. We don't have a gross max price yet from the design firm. It's a design build firm or project, and WC Construction said that we know that the existing budget estimate of $1 million is not going to cover it. So after conducting some value engineering, the new budget is around $1.3 million. If you recall, the airport revenue is going to cover this. But we're running a little bit short due to these recent projects on the airfield. I got one to share with you later this afternoon. And also the debt service, we're paying that $1.2 million. So we're asking for $500,000 of the PAYGO funds to continue this project. The next one I had on my list was the airport lower parking lot. If you've driven by the airport lately, you might have seen all the budget rental trucks and Avis trucks. And Avis is actually operating from a temporary trailer until we can get the terminal done, but that lot is structurally, there's a stormwater drain underneath it, and it's unsound, needs replacement, and also that asphalt's beyond its useful life. So once the terminal's done, they can locate up to the, Avis budget can load up, go up to the main terminal, and we can start design and get that lot completed. There's some improvements around the terminal. It's going to be the signage, new entrance sign, landscaping. We're going to have emergency phone there at the lower lot, but that lot is not covered and the stormwater pipe's not covered. So we're looking about $985,000 based on an engineer's estimate to get that project done. And the last one I had was up at North State Aviation, that 4001, that large facility that the county owns. It's our largest asset at the airport. Back in April 2021, the county was awarded a grant by the U.S. Economic Development Administration, the amount of $4.4 million. And at this point in the project, we need some additional funding just to get us over the finish line. We're hopeful the budgeted funds would be enough to accomplish a lot on our list, but we actually had to go through and cut out a lot of stuff that's needed for that facility. And so we're down to replacing a parking deck on the east, the top slab on the east side of the facility, and fixing some leaking windows. So if we can get that additional $542,000, about $56,000 is required to cover that contract you approved with Bar Construction a couple weeks ago, and then the rest of it's like contingency and testing. So if we can get that $542,000 in PAYGO, we can be good to go rolling next month. That's it. Any questions?
Questions for Mark? Good, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. All right, so just did a little sidebar with the chairman real quickly. He is okay if we move, I mean, this was actually the biggest set of decision points we had on this agenda. And if it's satisfactory, because we do have some very special guests here and an event to do, we will, you've got the information in front of you. The rest of the items on the agenda, we can actually just brief fully when we present them as action items next Thursday, if that's satisfactory. If there are questions between now and then about any of them, I think most of them are pretty straightforward. The Highland Avenue Park project we'd move forward on, but we're actually bringing it in within budgeted funds. I kind of was eager to do that one so we can actually show you we can do that. And then the last one that, Kirby's going to talk a little bit about the Haynes Mill Road property, but he can do that next Thursday as well. So if it's satisfactory with everybody, we'll just push that part of that off to the formal meeting next Thursday. Is that okay?
Anybody have an issue, problem with that, or had a question that you would want to talk about today?
Yeah, and if there's a burning need to talk through something in detail between now and next Thursday, of course, we can get staff either virtually or or with you to take care of that. So the last item is really item 25, Mr. Chairman. If you want to introduce that one, that would take us to our reception.
Well, we're very pleased to see, I see her in the back. She said, "Oh, we're finally getting here to my thing." To Kim Bresley, has been our dutiful Ag Extension Director for, I guess, almost 7 years, 6.5 plus. Thank you. Come on, you're welcome to come on up. In fact, we could probably, if you want to, the resolutions for next year, do you want to go ahead and read that? We could.
I think it'd be appropriate to go ahead and read it and present it to her today.
Let me bring it. You come on up. I'm going to get to that, and I can.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Commissioner Linville has the proclamation to read.
Oh, great, he's got it. Thank you. I was jumping ahead. Thank you. Well, we weren't there. He called on me, so I was trying to do it. Commissioner Linville, thank you.
Well, Ms. Grassley, I'm sure that when you first came here, and me either, probably didn't think about, I'm sure you thought about retiring, but that we would meet on close to the last day. And when the first year she was here, and I don't remember whether it occurred in the first year or not, but I have forgot about it. There's some things I just don't forget. I had been invited to one of the events at the Ag building, and I guess that Ms. Grassley had been around political people that talked a lot in meetings or events, and so she advised me very nicely that I was regulated to 3 minutes. So what I did, I think I accomplished that, and I left the best off last. I just marked it off. So, got a pretty good script here to read today, and it might take longer than 3 minutes to do that. And so, being the kind of guy that I am, if it takes longer than 3 minutes, I'm going to finish it. I'm not going to stop at the 3 minutes. So, we're glad to have you here today, and maybe some of the family members and Ag Timber members. I don't know whether all of them's here or not, but did you leave anybody to keep the door open over there? Okay. Well, I believe you only left one. So, okay, this proclamation is recognizing the accomplishments of Kim S. Grassley. What's that stand for?
Houghton, my maiden name.
Kim S. Grassley, on the occasion of her retirement as the Forsyth County Corporate Extension Director. Whereas Kimberly S. Grassley began her career at the University of Minnesota in 1982 as a 4-H youth development agent and served the University of Arizona as an extension agent, earning the rank of full faculty before joining the North Carolina University Corporate Extension as the County Corporate Extension Director on December the 14th, 2017. Whereas Kimberly S. Grassley is academically accomplished and holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Agriculture Extension Education with a minor in horticulture from the University of Arizona in Tucson, and a master's degree in agriculture education as also from the University of Arizona in Tucson. Whereas Kimberly S. Grassley has published a number of articles such as Give a Little, Get a Lot, Volunteer Service in Communities, in Rural Communities, and Making Your Stamp in Positive Youth Development. Whereas recognized for her leadership, Kimberly S. Grassley, over the course of her career, has participated on numerous professional committees, including as chair of a subcommittee of the Joint Council of Extension Professionals, chair of the National Association of Extension 4-H Agents Organization Stewardship Committee, co-chair of the Arizona 4-H Livestock Expo Invitational Committee, chair of the Pinal County Discovery and Garden Spaces Organization, chair of the Arizona 4-H Centennial Planning Team Auction, co-chair of the Volunteer Leadership Clover College Working Group, and chair of the North Carolina Cooperative Extension Scholarship and Program Quality Committee, among many other committee memberships and leadership roles. Whereas Kimberly S. Gressley initiated the Wellness Produce Box program with the American Recovery Plan Act funding to address health disparities in Forsyth County, serves on the county's Agriculture Park Complex Staffing Committee, and successfully applied for grants from the North Carolina Ag Foundation, Farm Bureau, and the Winston-Salem Foundation to expand the mission of cooperative extension. Whereas Kimberly S. Gressley is a devoted wife to husband Ron, dedicated mother to sons Chad and Kevin, and doting grandmother to grandchildren Jackson, Sawyer, Mackenzie, Byron, and Raylene. Now therefore be it resolved that Forsyth County Board of Commissioners hereby recognizes the exemplary service and accomplishments of Kimberly S. Gressley and thank her for her outstanding distinguished service to the state of North Carolina and citizens of Forsyth County. This will be adopted the 25th day of April the 24th. Now I'll come down and present the plaque. It looked like to me, Kim, that you've done a lot of things.
Found all that stuff. I feel tired now.
Well, you can talk when I get finished here now.
Okay.
Got this plaque here to present to you from the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners, and I believe, did the county manager make this? He's a
Ignore the
worker
imperfections.
He's a talented person, I'll tell you that. So, congratulations, and now you got 3 minutes.
I don't know where you guys found all that info, but it makes me sound like I am ready to retire, right? So, to all of you commissioners, Dudley, Damon, Chantel, all of you, and especially, it'll take me longer than 3 minutes if I cry.
Well, you got a little, I'll give you more if you need it.
My staff, I've been blessed to be here. This has been a joy. It's been wonderful. It's been really good work. And I will leave knowing that the department is in really good hands because they're very capable. That's terrible. Okay, I've never been given a whole paper towel roll before. Anyway, I do thank you all. It's been a joy. I truly thank Damon and Chantel for hiring me.
being a part of that. And many thanks. Anyway, many thanks to my husband too, who's put up with this, because I was like, oh, Chad's moving to North Carolina. Ron says, yep, that's pretty far away. And I said, well, I've been with U of A 30 years. I think I'll retire and go to North Carolina. And that's how I got here. And John Deere saw a way to move Chad to Wisconsin. So he went up there for 5 years, and he's coming back now. So we will be around. We would love to check in with y'all, but there's a rule with extension. I cannot show up for 6 months. But after that 6 months, though, I think I'll pop in and see how y'all are doing. But thank you all. You've been all a joy to work with. And I know you will continue to support, and thank you for the support for the new ag building. We especially love the fact it'll have a new roof, and we won't be getting flooded out and using lots of pails and big stuff to catch all the water. But that was supposed to be just funny about that. But anyway, I truly appreciate this and all of your support, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
So we adjourned.
Yes, we can head out we have a reception out in the lobby here. Thank you.
Oh, darn, I wanted to do that.